You're listening to the Heart of Giving podcast with Art Taylor, powered by bbbgive.org. Here we explore the motivations that form the basis of giving and service. We inspire generosity and celebrate the transformative effects that giving and service have on the human spirit and on community. The conversations featured on the podcast also uncover giving strategies that educate and provide tools to help listeners make impactful gifts of both their time and money. We hope you enjoy this episode.
This is the Heart of Giving podcast, powered by bbbgive.org. Give.org is the nation's standards-based charity evaluator, and it's your one-stop source for information on giving and reports on the most asked about charities. I'm Art Taylor. My guest today is Suzanne McCormick, and she is the CEO of the YUSA. And the YUSA is the National Resource Office for the Y Network, which is a massive enterprise. It's a leading nonprofit committed to strengthening community through youth development, healthy living, and social responsibility. Collectively, the Ys across the nation engage 13 million members, nearly 5 million of whom are under the age of 18. Suzanne became president in September of 2001, and she's a nonprofit executive with 31 years of experience at the national and local levels. And previously, she served for 3 years as U.S. president for United Way Worldwide. Suzanne, welcome to the Heart of Giving podcast.
Thank you, Art. I'm so happy to be here and spend time with you.
Well, I want to start with 31 years of experience in the nonprofit sector. What's that been like for you?
It's been an amazing ride. I found my calling in the social sector very early in my career, right after university. I had planned, I thought maybe to go to law school, and I thought about being a public defender. I had studied political science at school, but really my focus was on the politics of South Africa before apartheid ended. So I describe it more as a study in social justice. And then my last year at Duke University, again, thinking I was going to go the law school route, I happened upon an announcement about an open house for the U.S. Peace Corps. And I went to this open house. It was held on campus one evening. And I fell in love with the idea of serving as a U.S. Peace Corps volunteer. Part of that was because I envisioned maybe I'd get to go to South Africa because I had spent so much time studying it. As it turns out, I was accepted, but my assignment was in Thailand. I was in a very rural part of the northeast of Thailand, working in a very poor village, teaching English as a second language and doing community development work. And I fell in love with service. I fell in love with helping think about community change. And then when I came back to the United States, I just entered into a series of different roles, starting with an organization in New York City that focused on immigrants and refugees, and then a long period with United Way, American Red Cross, Community Action. But what they all have in common is all community-based organizations working to improve the lives of others. So I just feel really fortunate that my calling found me. I never second guessed it. And, I've been privileged and lucky to every day wake up, even when the work is hard, to know that the work is good.
Yeah. And the work can be hard. I think a lot of times people don't appreciate that even though we may have a passion and a love for the work we do in the nonprofit sector, that it's not always easy. And you don't wake up every day feeling as inspired as you might. But there's certain aspects of the work that keep us going. What is it that inspires you to keep going during those difficult times?
It's the people. It's the people that you get to work with. And when I say that, it's not only the great thing about nonprofits is I believe that you get to work with, a staff team, but you also have this opportunity to work with volunteers. And I say one of my favorite parts of my job is the opportunity to interact with my board of directors, who are folks from all different sectors who bring just this amazing amount of passion and expertise. And I get to sit alongside them and think with them and plan with them. But the thing that is the best about the work is when you get to see it in action, when you get to see it changing the life of a young person or a family or a senior. And any day that I walk into a YMCA, I can see that happening. And that's what makes the hard days worth it and easy. It's like, that's what it's all about, making sure that their lives are improved. But it's the people, and you get such a diversity of people that you get to work with in the nonprofit sector.
Now, you worked for, as you mentioned, a number of large, what we might call federated nonprofit organizations, which bring a type of scale to nonprofit work, but they can also be challenging from a management standpoint. What would you say are some of the common challenges that you see managing and leading a federated organization? And how are you able to overcome those challenges? What are some of the things that you're able to do? And I'll just say, a lot of times people think because you work at the national office, you're in control of things, but that's not quite how it works, is it?
Let's start there. No, that is not how it works in most cases. So much of what I do is try to influence change in our network. Now, we do at the national office, there are certain things that we have responsibility for. First and foremost, it's our job to hold our YMCAs accountable to our 11 membership standards. And those are the standards of that you have to be able to demonstrate in order to wave the Y flag and carry the brand and say you are part of the Y. And some of those are just basic things that we would expect in good governance. We, for example, have some standards that some nonprofits wouldn't have around child safety, for example, or aquatic safety, because we are working in situations where focus on safety is incredibly important. So we do oversee the accountability structure, but a lot of what we do is try to identify and scale best practices that come from our Ys around the country, elevate those, and try to promote them. But it's up to a local Y to decide, how it's going to deliver its programs, which is a blessing and a curse. It allows Ys to focus on the most important problems or opportunities in their specific community, which might be different, for example, in an urban setting versus a rural setting. So I think that's a strength, but it also sometimes makes it challenging for us because I can't tell you. I can show you a great program, and I can encourage you to think about adopting this great program. But in many cases, I can't say you have to do that. So leading at this level, it takes a lot of investment in relationship building, in influencing, in trust building, so that our Ys will look at the national office and say, yeah, they got my back. They have my best interests, and I should possibly consider what they're suggesting.
Now, there are things that you try to coordinate from a programmatic standpoint at a national level, though, right? What are some of the areas that the national office tries to get the Ys to coalesce around, aside from the accountability things that you mentioned?
Well, as you know, Art, when it comes to funding of nonprofits, especially when you're in conversations with national donors or national foundations, we do have scale across the country, and often when they invest, they want to know what are the aggregated common outcomes that we can impact across our footprint. And so having some common metrics in our programs is really important. And we have over time had the ability to develop those in partnership with some of our longstanding partners. Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, for example, has been a great partner in helping us develop an evidence-based measurement model that we just call strengthening communities. And so we know what it looks like when a community is strong. And so we have our Ys report in their different program outcomes into that structure so that we can tell an aggregated story. But it's also can be challenging. It's when we have 700, just around 766 YMCAs around the country, and they do vary in size. Some are small, some are quite large. And so that has an impact on time and capability. And sometimes in our smaller Ys, you've got fewer staff, and so their ability to pay attention to the reporting of metrics is sometimes they need a little more help. But yes, we do, especially in our youth development and our character building programs. We have common outcomes that we work towards, certainly in our aquatic safety programs. And then it can look different, again, depending on what the community needs from a Y.
Well, I don't know if you know, when speaking about impact, but I grew up in a YMCA in Philadelphia, not living there, but you might say I lived there because I was there so frequently. Just about every day between the time I would say 12 and 17, I spent time at the Y. And our Y was the Christian Street YMCA in Philadelphia, which was established in the late 1800s so that African Americans would have a Y to go to. And if you played basketball in Philadelphia, you knew about that Y and you were somehow connected to it. But my story was, Suzanne, that I started playing basketball there. And then the Y went under a renovation. And for about a year and a half, it was shut down so that it could create a larger space. And in 1975, it reopened. And before the doors opened, I was the first kid to play basketball in that Y before it officially opened. It was a great thing for me. And of course, the adults there were tremendous people.
Well, I love that story.
I'm not done yet. Wait a minute. I'm going to fast forward about 20 years after that, when the Y needed a renovation and another renovation. And I was asked to chair the board of managers to raise funds for that Y so that we could get the renovations done. And we went to a number of corporations and people in the area, and we were able to raise the funds necessary to bring that Y another generation of young people like me. And so that was one of the best full circle moments that I can ever have. And there's so many of us who just love what we were able to have how the impact that place had on us, not only the building, but the people. So I just thought you should know that it was a safe space for us.
Yeah.
And so I'm always going to be a fan of the Y, and that's my impact, but that's one person. How do you think about the impact on a national scale, though?
Well, your story gets repeated every day today. We have, for example, over like 500,000 kids in after-school programming right now at 10,000 sites around the country. Sometimes they're in Ys, sometimes they're not in Ys. We're also the largest nonprofit childcare provider in the nation. But what you talked about is your involvement in youth sports, which is about the sport, but more important, it's about you having a safe place, which you said, about you having a caring adult who is checking in and cares about how art is doing that day. And I describe the Y as a partner to parents. So your parents knew that you were in a safe place that probably allowed them to balance their work and your school schedules. And that continues to be a hallmark of who we are today. And then you wrap around the work that we do in the areas of healthy living and social responsibility. And, today I like to describe us, sometimes we say the third space. I wonder if maybe we're not the second space in communities these days because so many people work at home and live at home. But that continues to be our aspiration, is to be a place where kids and families and seniors can come and feel like they are seen and they are valued and they are safe and they belong. And especially, in this day where social isolation is such a huge epidemic. The Surgeon General, has called it the epidemic of our era. We really see the Y as a solution to that, to continue to help people like you when you were young to connect and feel like you belong.
And my grandchildren, 3 of them, attend the Y in Montclair, New Jersey. So
very good.
We're still Y people. And I know that my daughter and her husband would have a very tough time managing their 3 children if it weren't for the Y. So it's a godsend. It's a blessing to have these facilities and these people and these so many communities. So I guess I'm should be interviewing you, but I'm acting more as your spokesperson.
And I'll take it, Art.
So anyway, but let me, you mentioned something that I probably want to talk about a little bit, and that's, you mentioned social isolation. And the Generosity Commission, of which I was the co-chair of the Policy and Government Relations Task Force, recently released this report. And one of the things it noted was that some of the challenge we have with the decline in the number of people giving to charities is this whole idea of social isolation. And as a result, people don't feel as connected to institutions as they once did. And that is having an impact on how they think about supporting these institutions. Is there anything that you believe that we should be doing as a society to address that? And is there anything in particular that the Y or other institutions can do to relieve some of that isolation?
Well, I'll talk first about the Y, and then I'll share some thoughts on the broader sort of landscape. As I said, we believe that we really are a place where people can come and connect with the Y, but as importantly, connect with other people. So we're going to be continuing to focus on intentionally elevating how we are thinking about engaging people to mitigate the social isolation. How are we going to scale our programs? How are we going to create more welcoming environments? Even if you just think about, and this has started already, but if you even think about, well, you've walked into a Y, in the past it was, you had places for you've got swimming, you've got childcare, but nowadays we think about, well, even in the facility design, how do we create places for people to gather and to engage with one another after they're done doing whatever they came to the Y for? And that's already happening. It especially happens with seniors right now. I can't tell you how many Ys I've visited where after I see a group of seniors in the pool doing their daily exercise, I then see them migrate to the community room where I know they'll sit for the next 2 to 3 hours just connecting with each other. So we're going to continue in that. I think the other, on a national scale, I've been in some conversations about the decline in volunteerism, and yet we know volunteerism does make people feel like they have purpose. And so, like other nonprofits, we've been in conversations with the Points of Light Foundation. What can we do to re-emphasize the opportunities for volunteerism that can help people connect? And I do think that that's, we don't necessarily always need to look for brand new solutions. I think hearkening back to some things that worked in the past, and I do think volunteerism has a solid evidence of helping people feel engaged and feel valued. So I want to see more emphasis put on that.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I just interviewed a woman who runs an organization that helps people get medical care who have no insurance, and they provide a lot of it. And most of the medical services that people receive are from volunteers.
Mm.
And what was so interesting, Suzanne, is that she said most of the professionals who are delivering this care have dropped out of working professionally for a living in that field. So they actually have these skills and they do other things now for a living. COVID got them completely out of the profession, but they give back freely. They'd rather give their time away than work at it for a living, if you can imagine that.
Well,
and I just think about all of the skills that people have that they might give to organizations like the Y and others, not doing it anymore for a profession potentially. And you mentioned older people, right? Older people have a wealth of skills, right, that we could be giving back. So I don't know what you think about that, but I just thought it was an interesting comparison.
I love it. And also, I will say the Y is a great place for a second career, like volunteerism or maybe not a full on career. I have a dear friend who, and I don't think that she'll mind that I share this story because she was so proud of herself. She ran a very successful, large marketing company up in Maine. I spent 20 years in Maine. And she retired. And just recently I saw on her Facebook post that one of her goals since she retired was to qualify to teach aerobics, or I don't know what it is, like fitness dance at her Y in Bath, Maine. And she's now doing that. And in addition, she is pro bono. She said, I'm their pro bono chief marketing officer now because that was her skill set. And I thought, that's like a beautiful example of she had this amazing career and now she has connected to the Y. It's doing something for her and it's giving her an opportunity to do something for them.
Yeah, that's great because, we have this. The other thing I was thinking about, and I don't know how this could work, but when you think about the generations that connect at the Y, are there opportunities to do more cross-generational kinds of programming where there are young people who are learning from older people and vice versa? And I don't know if that's anything that's even possible, but when I think about how older people are living longer, we have a lot more I say we because I'm in that group now. We have a lot more to contribute. We're not quite done yet. And what's retirement anyway? For a lot of us, I don't know what that is. But then there are younger people as well who could, I think, benefit from whatever wisdom we might want to give them. But we can learn too. There's so much we can learn from younger people. So this reverse mentoring and cross mentoring and connection and multi-generational programming can be, I think, a helpful thing for our society.
I agree completely.
Suzanne, one of the other things I wanted to just talk with you about, I noticed you posted a post on LinkedIn not too long ago about the challenges that we have in our society connecting and communicating across differences. And I thought that was so powerful that I would want to ask you about that. As you know, we talked and I'm chairing the board of a group called Convergence Policy, which is working to help people solve problems across differences. What is your take on this whole challenge that we're facing nationally and maybe even around the world when people have differences in ideology and don't seem to even be able to communicate or talk to each other about solving problems? How do we address that?
Well, we see it all the time. We talked about social isolation, but we also talked about there's such a degree of polarization right now, amped up probably more so than ever because we're, in a year of a general election. We have recognized this, and we, for the last 2 years, have been working in partnership with 3 other organizations in an initiative that we call the Team Up Project. And we are partnering with Interfaith America, who is really an expert in facilitating dialogue amongst those who have differences, whether they're differences of faith or politics, name any sort of spectrum of difference. We're also working in partnership with Catholic Charities USA and Habitat for Humanity. And this project, our mission is to empower people to build connections and work together across differences with others, not to necessarily agree, but to appreciate that there can be differences. And we're using our programs that already exist and adding on this layer of intentional bridge building conversation. And we're just into the second year of it, and it's showing good success. We have an evaluator. We'll have more probably in about 6 months to report out, but creating intentional connections often through what we were talking about, Art, in that arena of volunteerism. And so we see, again, critical to the role we can play in the U.S. is not just creating space for people to connect, but helping teach people the kinds of conversations you can have to build appreciation.
Yeah. And in our organizations, I mean, you mentioned there are over 700 YMCAs across the country. You have to expect that there are going to be people in these groups who don't agree. I mean, one Y might have people who think one way, another Y will have people who think a different way. But
yeah. We look like America, yes.
So just like America.
Like we represent within our movement is the diversity of our real America.
Mm-hmm. And so, but you all come together to work on a common mission, which is really important to consider. You have people who think very differently. But when it comes to the mission of the Y and serving young people and bringing people together to relieve isolation and to have community events and so forth and learn how to swim, you're common on that theme, right? And so
I think it's part of our DNA, like that focusing on connecting. I was just in this conversation with a group of my CEO colleagues, and the conversation that we were having was specifically around how do we get more intentional in doing this. And it starts with, for example, Art, just how we train our staff, like how we train our staff to approach everyone who walks through the door in a way that is validating, valuing, welcoming. So I think that's a part of it. And that's where we're going to put more emphasis in the next several years of kind of re-elevating some intentionality about that. I talked about it's also what your spaces look like. It's also where you're taking your programs. Some of my favorite work that I see within our movement is the work of Ys that are taking Ys outside of the walls of their facilities and taking them into communities. I had a great visit to Memphis, Tennessee earlier this year, and they have a program which otherwise around the country have, but it's called Y on the Fly. And so they have these vans that they outfit with all kinds of activities, and they go into neighborhoods or they go in the parking lot of a library and they set up shop and they welcome the community in to come together. So those are some of the things that, I think we already have great practices in place. It's what's our opportunity to scale those and to make sure there's more of them.
Well, anything you can do on that front certainly wouldn't hurt our country. I think it would help tremendously when you think about the number of volunteers and people who work in these organizations. If we could just start with our own organizations and build in this idea of let's lead with the diversity and respect that we have for each other's differences and still be able to solve problems. I think it could be you are a tremendous asset already to our country, but I think it could be an especially important asset if we could do this bridge building and demonstrate how it's done to those outside of the nonprofit sector in general.
Well, that's our goal with Team Up. So more to come on that.
Great. Well, part of me has this idea of always focusing a little bit on the future. And I know that the Y is a forward-looking organization, and you, as its leader, have to be thinking about what may be coming around the corner. What are you seeing now, maybe over the next 5 to 10 years, if we look up, what might we be seeing when we think of the Y? You're anticipating tremendous differences in how you operate or the kinds of services that you provide? I know that AI is a growing technology that we're seeing that's changing the way that we work and play in some regards. What are you seeing that we should be paying attention to that may impact how the Y does its work?
Well, I'm going to anchor back to some of the things we've talked about. I think, we are continuing to pay a lot of attention to mental health. We've been talking about social isolation. We haven't said mental health yet. We are paying a lot of attention to mental health and the important role that it plays in overall health and well-being. And we do have research that shows that what Ys do every day does make a significant impact or contributes to an individual's mental health. And that is the things that we've talked about. It's a safe environment. It's welcoming. It's a place where people can build connections and relationships. So we're going to continue to pursue some specific strategies to support mental health. We have what we call activation cohorts, and that's when we bring together a group of Ys to work together to understand. And in this particular area, what we call our community care model, which really emphasizes a focus on prevention and community-based supports in that mental health space, not necessarily clinical. So we're going to continue to focus on that. Switching gears, of course, I think we all have our eyes on AI and what that can do. We've got a really innovative YMCA in Cincinnati, Ohio, who has just kind of jumped into the AI space. And so we're watching and partnering to learn. Some of the initial applications are just providing our staff members with a better sort of reference point to be able to provide better service and program expertise. So for sure, we're watching that. And then I think, again, we will celebrate our 175th anniversary in 2026. And when I have studied our history and looked back at the strength of our organization, I want to anchor to what we've always done. And that is be that caring and compassionate organization for America and the world as things have changed. And we've proven that we can adjust and deliver different things based on the time. And so I see our future in this social isolation space. Like that is the epidemic of this time that we need to be a leader in.
Well, Suzanne, thank you for giving me your time today. And this has been very informative, giving us this update on where the Y is, a little bit about your life, so that people could get closer to understanding who you are and your values. And also the work that you're doing across the sector to connect institutions in a way that I think will be valuable for those institutions and the Ys in general. I really do believe that people who lead institutions like yours that are large organizations that have tremendous scale have also the opportunity and I think responsibility to lead the sector as a whole so that all organizations can rise, not only yours, but all can rise because of your good work and your leadership. And I appreciate your willingness to connect with others in a way that you have to make that happen. And so I want to just, again, if you're listening to this podcast for the first time, this is a weekly show, and we come out every Tuesday with a new episode. I hope you will subscribe, especially if you're a YMCA person. You have a YMCA fan, so you should be listening to these shows. And we'll come out every Tuesday. You can hear us on all major podcast platforms for the audio and the video we post on YouTube. So we'll see you back here next week.
You've just listened to the Heart of Giving podcast with Art Taylor. Be sure to tune in next time for a brand new episode. To listen to our other interviews, visit heartgiving.podbean.com. That's heartgiving.podbean.com. Subscribe to our show on major podcast platforms. The thoughts and opinions expressed on this podcast are the views and opinions of the guests, not those of the BBB Wise Giving Alliance or program affiliates. This podcast is for information and educational purposes only and is copyrighted with all rights reserved. This podcast is protected by Podbean's terms of service.